leadership is about service, serving the people that you're leading, and I don't think people often recognize that. That's the hardest part of it, frankly.
Welcome to Aggie Legends, where we talk with founders, CEOs, and other successful Aggies about the lessons in leadership they've experienced throughout their careers. I'm Ben Wiggins, May's MBA class of 2018, and today we're talking to Darren Woods, the CEO of ExxonMobil. Darren, how are you doing today?
Very good, Ben. Thanks.
It's our pleasure to have you here. Darren is an engineering graduate from Texas A&M who holds an MBA from Northwestern. He joined Exxon in 1992 and became chairman and CEO in 2017. He's widely respected as an industry leader and remains committed to Texas A&M University, including through service on the Engineering Advisory Council. Let's start with a look at your early years. What brought you to Texas A&M, and what were some of your most impactful memories in Aggie land?
Well, my early years, my father worked with the U.S. military, so we moved around quite a bit, and I ended up the middle of my junior year coming back to Texas, small town south of Dallas, and met the woman who was to become my wife. And
yes.
I wanted to stay in Texas because we'd been moving around so much. I hadn't really landed on A&M as the school, but my wife wanted to go to A&M, and so I thought it's good a reason as any, and came to A&M and fell in love with the school.
What was the moment where you knew, okay, this is what it's going to be? You mentioned that she wanted to come here, but is there a particular story where you felt like, okay, that's the course?
I think the academic rigor, the values, the honor code. I can tell you that the Aggie honor code is something that I've lived my life with, and actually I think the things I've done in my job and my career are very closely linked to the values of A&M, and so there was just I think a connection with the values and how the school ran, and the values that they had, and the academic rigor, the work that we did. So it was a good fit.
And then memories as a student. What stands out to you most about your time here?
Midnight Yell, I have to say, is for me probably the thing that I still remember very distinct experiences there. It's a very unique thing, I think, in life, the football game. So I think the standard things that kids like in college. Yeah.
So you finished your degree here and then decided to go get an MBA. What prompted that decision?
Well, actually, when I was here, my career ambition was to become a PhD, and I was going to do research.
Okay.
And did a fellowship my senior year, and after doing that for the year, I was working in the area that I wanted to study in after I graduated, and I decided I needed a bit of a break. And so I decided to go work for 3 years and make sure that I knew what I wanted to do. And during that time, I was a technical consultant working for the Air Force, moving around to different engineering companies, and it became very clear to me, you can be the best engineer in the world, but if you don't know how to make money, you don't know how to fund your ideas, you're never going to be successful. So I decided I need to know how to make money. The business side of the equation. I actually made a huge mistake when I was in school by being so narrowly focused on just the technical stuff. I really felt like the way to be successful was get really deep in the areas that I was interested in. It's all technical, all science. And in hindsight, I realized, there's a lot of other things that have to come together for a successful career or to launch successful products, and there was a whole lot of things I didn't quite understand, and I felt like I had a big gap in my knowledge, so I went back to get my MBA to fill those gaps in. So
then looking back, you have the opportunity to accumulate the technical knowledge, and then the opportunity to accumulate the business knowledge.
Right.
Looking back, does it seem like it kind of unfolded the way it should have?
It worked out perfectly. I think it's not a unique formula. I think business schools generally like to bring in engineers because of the way engineers are trained to think about problem solving. And then when you mix that with, I think, some of the skills and capabilities associated with business and how you compete and how you organize and strategy and all the pieces of a business, those two oftentimes fit very well together, and it certainly was true for me.
Sure. I mean, in startup world, technical founders are frankly more valuable than non-technical founders. I say that as a non-tech myself. When you joined Exxon earlier in your career, did you have ambitions to one day be in the C-suite?
No, I really didn't. In fact, when I was interviewing for the job at the time, we typically hire undergraduates, and then we develop them through the course of their careers.
Yeah.
Very unusual to hire an MBA, and very unusual to hire an MBA directly into the business, which was how I joined the company. So it was made pretty clear to me that I wasn't going to be the CEO because I think MBAs had a reputation coming into the company that somehow we had this view that we were going to try to get someplace, and that was not my interest. And I can still remember one of my interviewers saying, you're not going to be the CEO. What do you think about that? And I said to him, well, what does the CEO do? And he said, I don't know. And I said, well, then I don't know if I want to be it. And so I just really focused on, I think, getting a job that utilized my skills, that helped me grow. Every job I had with the company, my test was always, am I learning something?
Yeah.
Am I growing personally and professionally? And if I am, then just keep going and we'll see where the next job goes. And there's a philosophy in the company, you're only as good as your last job. And so this idea, I never had this view about where I was going to go necessarily. It was always about being successful in the thing that the challenge that the company gave me to address. And that's how I've run my career, frankly.
So the first question that you asked yourself is, am I learning something? As the CEO, are you now better positioned to kind of learn what you want to learn? Or what are the pros and cons of being able to learn from the CEO seat?
Well, I think with respect to the company, I'm responsible for the arena to learn in is defined.
Yeah.
Because the company is so big, we're involved in so many different sectors all across the planet that the understanding what's happening and connecting the dots and thinking how we want to where I want to take the company, how we want to position ourselves to win. There's a lot of learning that's involved in that, and so I would say I don't have the luxury of, if I'm interested in a particular area that's not relevant to making this company more successful, that doesn't get the time. Mm-hmm. It's really focused on what are the things, where do I think the opportunities for the company are, how do we move the company forward, and so that tends to be where I stay engaged. Then obviously our industry is so fundamental to society and to modern living that governments, governments are very dependent on the success of the industry as a whole. Yeah. Because ultimately, if the products that we make aren't flowing and they're not available and they're not affordable, then the people that they govern aren't happy generally.
Sure.
And so we get involved in a lot of political or engaged in a lot of government discussions, and generally helping them understand the dynamics, the macros.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've held many roles with the company and have supported their efforts around the globe. What's it like moving around and taking on new positions so frequently? I mean, it's something you were, I guess, used to. Yeah.
Well, actually, when I was growing up, we moved about every 2 years. And when I went to college, I told my dad, I will never do to my family what you did to me, because I did not like that lifestyle. Sure. It was only after a few years of being at A&M I realized how fortunate I had been to have the experiences to live in other parts of the world and really, I think, see things from very different angles. I think it's really hard to step outside the paradigm you live in, and when you're forced to do that by moving, it's just, I think, a very enriching experience. And so I looked for a job where I could continue to do that and actually raise my kids in that environment. And I told my kids when they were very young, there will be times this will be very difficult, but I promise you will look back at this at some stage and be thankful that you've had the experiences. And all three of my kids today, they're all grown and out of the house. They've all reflected positively on that experience, and they all had some tough times as we were moving around. The company very much believes in developing people to their full potential.
Yeah.
And so from your very first supervisory job, it's your job is to find the next CEO. And I believe that coming into the company is how do we get the best out of people? And then we put them in jobs to develop them. I think a lot of companies focus on training. We train through on-the-job work and responsibilities that we give people. And one of the things I love about the company is we will sacrifice the short-term benefits of the job to develop the person. And so as soon as an individual who's got high potential, we can see the potential to get to high places in the company, as soon as they've gotten what they need to from the job, they've got the development experience they need, we move them to the next one. And so my entire career with the company, I was changing jobs every couple of years. And at that time, every job change meant a job move. And so it was brand new. Went to very different I've done trading, I've run refineries, I've run retail service stations, shipping. I've been kind of, especially chemical businesses. the company really gave me an opportunity to see a lot of different parts of the business. And so I had many careers within one company, one career, which I think is a great opportunity. And we still offer that today to people who join the company.
Fantastic. Any particularly memorable experiences working abroad? Like,
I was running the distribution business in the UK when they had the big strike there, and all the truckers stopped all the fuel moving in the UK. And so I was involved in managing our company's response to those strikes and fuel not moving. And initially when that happened, people were cheering because they were protesting government taxes on fuel. Very quickly, what people found out is no food was making it to grocery stores. Many hospitals that were in isolated areas, they were running out of power because they couldn't get diesel. And it became very clear to the population very quickly that without the reliable supply of fuel, that things started eroding very, very quickly. And so almost in an instant, you went from people cheering the strike to people demanding fuel and getting things out. So it was a very dynamic time. It was all across the country. The government was very involved. So it was a unique experience for someone who at the time was pretty young.
What values guided you through observing conflicts like that and navigating a variety of challenging situations? And what might surprise our viewers, in terms of the stuff that you really clung to get you through challenging situations?
I always tell our young employees when you're thinking about your career, to thy own self be true. And so one of the advantages of moving around, as I did, you're constantly in new environments. And so you either have to learn how to adapt and try to fit in at every place you go, or you kind of focus in on what do you believe in, what are your values, and you stay true to those. So very early in my life, I kind of took that latter approach to just say, what are the things that I believe, what are important to me. My father was a very principled man, and so thinking about what's the right thing to do. And one of the reasons I was attracted to not only A&M but my company is a culture of do the right thing. And I always tell our people, do the right thing for the right reasons and do it in the right way. And that's the way we'll run the business. And so many times over the course of my career, particularly when you're out in the field, one thing about our company and our business is the jobs that we tend to have involve huge sums of money. You're running a refinery, it's millions and millions of dollars a day that you're responsible for. And
Sure.
Making decisions can often cost millions of dollars. And I always knew, even when we made decisions that was going to cost the company money, that if it was the right thing to do, the company would support me. And so that's kind of how I've grown up. And in this job in particular, all that external pressure that you get to kind of go along with whatever the narrative is for our business, that's not a tenable approach. We make investments that go for decades. And so you got to really stay focused on what are the fundamentals, what's the right way of doing it, and then implement those investments and live with the consequences of them, and not kind of shift with whatever the political winds are or whatever the current narrative out there is.
I have to ask, what was the decision that you made, at least in the short term, that did cost the company money?
Well, very early in my career, I was responsible for a manufacturing facility, and you tend to have cycles every 3 to 5, 7 years. You shut those down and do a lot of maintenance work. We were and once you shut a refinery down, that's where you start racking up millions of dollars of cost with no revenue coming in.
Yeah. And
so you try to make those as short as possible. And right when we shut down the refinery and went into maintenance, we had the crane organization, the contractor that we had come in to operate all the cranes, came in and said, if you don't give us more money, then we're out of here. And that was instant that, okay, now it's just going to blow my turnaround, because once you lose your cranes, you got to end. Basically, so we're not going to be extorted. I will not, and their view was, look, the amount of money we're asking for versus the amount of money you're going to lose by extending this turnaround, they're orders of magnitude different. So just give us the extra money. And you'll save all this delay, and therefore it's economically, you're better to do that. My view was that was the wrong decision.
You felt like they were doing it on purpose?
Oh, and I knew they were doing it on purpose.
Okay,
yeah, absolutely. Right. So I said, no, goodbye.
Yeah.
You're out, and we'll find somebody else.
Yeah.
So there was a decision where I consciously decided to disoptimize the turnaround plans that we had put in place, extend the turnaround, which was going to cost millions and millions of dollars. I mean, I wasn't unique in that respect. have to make those types of decisions. You do this enough time, people stop asking, and they realize they know what the answer is going to be, so don't even try it. And I think that's you earn that the hard way,
sure,
and then you hang on to it, and that's how we run the company.
Yeah. So then running the company, you become CEO. You're now the top leader of one of the world's largest companies with 60,000 employees. Tell a story from that transition. Like, did you go and sit in the office and just kind of smile to yourself and appreciate the opportunity?
No.
Like what?
Not at all.
How did you react to that?
Well, I've said this before publicly. I wasn't vying for the CEO job. I didn't really want the CEO job.
Okay.
Primarily because it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. And for a company this big, you take on a huge responsibility.
Yes.
I was talking to the engineering students yesterday and said, people think that the higher the company go, the easier it gets because you get to tell everybody what to do. The reality is you have more obligations. And for me, stepping into this role, I felt the weight of the responsibility of, I've got not only all my employees that I have to run this company to be successful, but their families and the contractors that work for us and the resource owners that we support and all the retirees and our shareholders. And we start to mount up the number of people who rely or we will impact if we're not successful. It's a heavy burden. So I recognize that responsibility, and it's with you from the time you step into the job, and you don't put it down until you step out of the job. And so I would say that's how I thought about going into it. It felt like I had just been given a big weight to carry. And while I was very appreciative of the opportunity and was very committed to doing my best, I recognized that I don't think you step into these jobs knowing that you can do them. I think if somebody goes into a job like this and their attitude is, I got this, then either you don't understand the job.
Too many unknowns.
You are way overconfident because you've got, there's a lot of learning on this job, obviously. And so I think you go into it with understanding this huge obligation and responsibility you have and the uncertainty of how successful can you be in doing this job. So
in startups and so forth, the things that we look for, that investors look for in founders the most is, I think number one is a sense of curiosity, which kind of pinged in my mind as you were saying that, like sort of going in, sort of ready to discover what the job is kind of what I'm hearing from you. Do you feel like that's an important quality for someone stepping into a CEO role, is just sort of a sense of curiosity and a kind of what is this going to be? I wonder what this will be like.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the way I would characterize it for our company, and as I came up to the company, it's an expectation that you make it better. And so I think every job I've had with the company, first of all, you've got to deliver on what that job responsibility is. I kind of call that hygiene. It's table stakes. You got to perform the function of the job.
Sure.
But that's just where you start.
Right.
The real question is, what can you do to make it better than you found it? And so as I came up through the company, every job I had, the expectation was you leave it better than you found it.
Yeah.
And frankly, in our company, if you made improvements that didn't sustain themselves after you left the job, then it wasn't a good improvement. The advances that you made, the improvements that you made, had to stand on their own. They had to be sustainable and not propped up by an individual person or the power of that person. And so coming into this job, it was the same thing. It was what's the opportunities? How can I help make this company more successful?
Okay.
And you kind of go on an exploration to figure out where's my opportunity set at.
Right. And you have people watching everything you do, critiquing every move, critiquing gestures and, like a wrong individual word that you chose. How does that impact you? Like, that seems like it could be a very heavy weight to carry.
Yeah, I think, I was advantaged. I talked about moving around a lot when I was young, and then this pressure to conform, but then always going to a new place and then changing to conform, or you decide to be your own person. And as a young person, I think we all know that, kids can be pretty tough. And so you take a lot of, growing up, there was a lot of, we call it bullying, what do you want, but because you were different, that attracted a lot of attention. And because I insisted on staying different, that attention was probably longer than most people might experience. that actually prepared me very well for this job, because you got to get to I got to the stage where, I don't judge myself based on what others are saying. I judge myself based on this value system that I have and the standards that I hold myself to. That's been very helpful in this job, because you're right, there are a lot of critics, and they're very loud. You got to have a very thick skin, and I just keep coming back to, am I doing what I think is the right thing? I won't say that you always do the right thing. I mean, you try to do the right thing, but you can never know for sure that everything you do is right. But the intent to do the right thing and commit yourself to it, and do your best. And that's why I was talking to the engineering students. You do all these things. How do you handle the stress? All you can do is your best. And if you've done that, I always say, if I left it all on the field, there's nothing more I can ask of myself. And so I'll hold my head up. And if it wasn't good enough, then it wasn't good enough. But the other thing is, I didn't pick this job; it picked me. So I'll give it my best. But I didn't sell myself into this job. So I don't have to pretend to be anything than what I am. And work hard, give it my best, try to do the right thing, and then the rest will take care of itself. But I will say, it's a bumpy ride. There are a lot of loud critics out there.
I believe that. You refer to ExxonMobil as a technology company rather than an oil and gas company, which is what some folks would call it. But obviously, there's a ton of innovation happening all the time. So I don't know, how do you manage those dynamics? Well,
it's actually, to me, one of the exciting parts of the job. You make the point that they don't think of us as an innovation company, but they often forget that oil and natural gas is a depleting resource. So as you produce it, it's gone.
Yeah.
It's not like you build a manufacturing plant and just keep stamping out whatever product you're making. And so you're always on a treadmill and things are running out. So to be in a business where what you sell is always running out, puts a lot of pressure on the business to, how do I refill the pipeline? How do I replace the things that I've produced? And it gets harder and harder because generally speaking, the industry starts with the easiest stuff, and then they work their stuff, and that's how it works. And so the industry in general has been an industry of innovation. And if you look at the progress the industry's made, and actually the resources that are being developed today, if you went back 25 years, 10 years, much of it would not have been under production or been able to be developed, because the technology wasn't there. I mean, fracking here in the U.S. is a great example, the unconventional shale.
Sure.
Fracking's been around for 100 years, but the ability to apply that and get oil out of rock that looks like granite is a huge innovation. And so that's always been part of the blood of the industry. Because we're an integrated company with a lot of different businesses, we also have a chemical business. People forget that we're one of the largest chemical companies in the world as well. Mm-hmm. There's huge innovation in those products. If you think about the plastics and the rubbers and the materials that go into every product that modern life now uses, most of it comes from hydrogen and carbon molecules. And so we had referred to ourselves as an energy company for a long time and an oil and gas company. I actually thought that was a mistake, and it became very clear to me when I got into this job, because of that energy label, the expectation was we'll go into wind and solar because the planet's going to transition. We're going to a new energy system.
Okay.
We looked at it and said, we don't know anything about wind and solar, and frankly, that's an electron business. We're a molecule business, and so we can't bring a lot of value to that, to wind and solar, because it's not where we have a capability set. Instead, it's really around the molecules, and how do we transform and manipulate those molecules to make products and meet needs of society. And that's, frankly, that discussion, as I was trying to convince people, you don't want ExxonMobil doing wind and solar because all we bring is a checkbook. You want us using our unique capabilities to help solve this problem. So we're committed to trying to reduce emissions, but we're going to do it based on what we're good at and where we have capabilities, not where somebody else is good. And that early discussion really developed into this, we are a technology company. If you look at the fundamentals of everything we do, the projects that we build, the products that we make, they're all anchored in the technology and the evolving technology. And so and we've now consolidated all of our technology organizations into one organization, and we've put it at the heart of our campus. It's the heart of what we do. And all these other things are very important, but if we're not evolving, if we're not discovering, if we're not innovating from a technical standpoint, we will not be successful in the long term. We've been around for 140 years, and the horizon that I think about is the next 100. I'm not focused on the next 5 years. It goes much further than that.
Printed on the archway to the courtyard, molecules, not electrons. But
people get that, that's the thing. When people's like, that makes a lot of sense. So look, they finally found a way to kind of explain why we don't do wind and solar. It's just not a capability that we have.
Sure. Okay, but talking about next 100 years, not next 5. You famously attended the United Nations Climate Change Conference for the first time in 2023 to add your voice to the conversation, and your attendance there was a bit of a surprise to some people. What was that like?
Yeah, well, it's funny because in this job, I told you, earlier that we really focus on the fundamentals, figure out what the right answer here is, and we could see that the solution set for addressing the risk of climate change for the energy transition was a very narrow one, and really driven by more of an ideology than, I'd say, the physics of the real world. We were never against wind and solar. It's just, and it has a role to play, but it's necessary but not sufficient. And so we weren't having a discussion about what else needs to happen. So we were pushing back against that. I was pushing back against going into wind and solar, but also that we need to open the aperture. This is a very hard problem to solve. We need a lot more solutions.
Yes.
And we shouldn't start out by narrowly focusing on just one or two.
Electrons.
And so let's think about what else we can do. That message was not very well received early on. I think as time went on and we got more penetration, people began to see some of the deficiencies. And then what else do we need to do? And so I think what I've noticed in this job over the last 9 years is a maturity in the thinking and the recognition. Yes, wind and solar are important. EVs are important. Sure. They all play a role, but they're not, we need more. We need other things. We've got a huge challenge on our hands. We should get every industry, every company figuring out how they can contribute based on what they're good at to this solution set. And I think there's a growing interest in that. So I went to COP at a time when I think people were beginning to be interested and we need to think more about what else we should be doing here. And my sense of responsibility is, I should, based on our experience, what we know, contribute to that. And you don't have to agree with me. You don't have to tell me I'm just going to tell you, based on what we know, this is what we think would work in our area. I'm sure there's other things that other people know, but everybody contributing their best thinking to this is going to get us to a better answer.
So what is the most favorable adaptation then in terms of how the broader ecosystem isn't the right, the broader community is thinking about, all right, yes, wind, solar, but what else? Where do you think, all right, we've made some progress here?
So I think we've made progress in wind and solar. We've made progress in EVs, but the problem with wind and solar, you can think of it a little bit like farming. You're only going to have a productive farm where you've got good soil and the right amount of rain and sunshine, and that's true with wind and solar. You're not going to have a successful wind farm if you're in a place that doesn't have any wind,
right?
And if you're not in a sunny location. So they have a very important role. The thing that I find, we jumped into solutions before really understanding how we're going to tackle the problem holistically. The thing I find amazing is if you think about climate change and limiting CO2 emissions, today there is no mechanism to account for CO2.
Okay.
No accounting mechanism for it. And so my first question is, if you want to eliminate it, which we're committed to doing, how can you do it if you're not accounting for it? You don't know where it's at. Where's it coming from? What products are driving the most emissions? How should we think about that? And so step one is the world needs a carbon accounting system. One that balances to the total emissions of the planet. If we're going to reduce it, it's going to be absolutely critical. Once you have a carbon accounting system, you can begin to understand what products and services in society generate the most emissions and who's producing them the most responsibly by measuring carbon intensity. So
did you hear a lot of conjecture about this kind of stuff?
Conjecture?
Well, because you'll hear people say that the biggest problem for carbon emissions is this, and then 2 weeks later you'll hear somebody else say the biggest problem for carbon emissions is this, right. And it's something totally different. I just mean, to your point, like it seems like we kind of don't really have good data.
We don't have good data, and the other, I think, big miss in this space is we've jumped right to let's replace everything we've built over the last 140 years. And I would not push against evolution and transition to something new. But my question is, why aren't we working on the stuff we've already got while we transition? Because I promise you, it's going to take a lot longer than people think. It's going to be a lot more expensive. And so let's work on decarbonizing what we're already using while we work to change and bring in products that don't have the carbon. And a carbon accounting and carbon intensity allows you to start down that path. It also allows you to understand the trade-offs that you're making. And it also allows policymakers to understand the policies they're putting in place, how effective are they? Just give you one example. If you look at the subsidy that the government is giving for electric vehicles, it works out to be about $900 per ton of CO2 removed. Okay. If you look at the subsidy the government is giving to reduce for carbon capture and storage, it's $85 a ton. So, and I don't say that to argue against EVs. I'm just saying that every entity or organization has constraints. We're all resource constrained. And so you need to optimize your spend. The biggest, if you want a portfolio of things, fine, invest in them, but recognize what it's costing you and allocate your dollars appropriately. And today we don't have a mechanism for doing that. So for something that is as critical as the climate, and for something that people talk about being an existential threat, to not have these fundamental building blocks to really evaluate how best to approach this, I think is a huge miss, and is frankly getting in the way of the world making a lot more progress, a lot faster, and at a much lower cost. Okay. And people are slowly starting to, I think, realize we got to put some of these building blocks in place, some of these foundational things if we're going to be successful here.
Yeah, that makes total sense. With all of that in mind, then, top leadership lessons that you would share with young professionals. What would surprise them about the leadership guidance that you would offer them?
Well, I mentioned it earlier. This idea that I think true leadership starts with knowing yourself, and people talk about. Are leaders made or are they born? And I'm kind of like, yeah, they are. I think it takes both of those, and there are all kinds of styles and different. But you have to be true to yourself. You have to know who you are and then you have to understand what is needed from you. And one thing I think people, certainly in my career, as I've mentored and helped people grow, and as you move up and become, you have more and more responsibility of bigger leadership jobs, the service factor becomes bigger and bigger, and it stops being what you're good at or what you're comfortable doing, and it's more about what do they need from you. And the bigger the organization and the harder the challenges, the more they need from you. And so it's you got to start with what you are, and then you have to figure out a way to grow and to meet the needs of what they need, what the people you're leading need. And that is, I think, oftentimes not recognized, but leadership is about service, serving the people that you're leading. And I don't think people often recognize that. That's the hardest part of it, frankly.
I believe that. You mentioned that your wife was your high school sweetheart. You decided to come together here. And you're a father of 3, grandfather. How has family influenced your career and the way you show up as a leader?
Well, I would not be where I'm at today without my family. There's no doubt about that. And certainly it starts with my wife. I think she's been a very good influence on me and helped me help support the person that I am. But I keep a very distinct line between work and family. I don't bring work home. I just feel like when I'm working. Focused on that. When I'm home, I'm focused on my family. Moving around all the years I have with the company, we got very close as a family, and so it's a very important part of my life. If I'm not at work, I'm with my family, and even to this day, as the kids have gotten older and they've gotten married or they've gotten significant others, I always wondered early whether that would draw them away or whether that would grow the circle and bring them closer. And we've been very fortunate that as the kids have found their partners in life, they've come into the circle, and so the family's getting bigger. The grandkids add a very loud new dimension, but it's a way of disconnecting from the challenges of the job, because you can't bring the job into and play with a 5-year-old. I mean, they're distinct things, and so it's really, for me, a way to kind of disconnect from everything that is back at the office. having the kids around, and it's a joy. I tell people that grandkids are the only magic left once you reach 60 in life, and I really believe that it's magic.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing your lessons in leadership with us today on Aggie Legends. It's been a pleasure having you here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
On behalf of Mays Business School, I'm Ben Wiggins. We hope you'll like and subscribe to Aggie Legends. Feel free to leave a comment. It really helps. Here at Mays Business School, we're building a better future through business, and we thank you for being a part of it.